again. The topic of my session is on the screen. But I'm not sure that too many of you know this name, as I learned during the intro. So, Tannhäuser is the name of the Wagner opera, and it was.
Oh my God.
There was a certain scandal about the performance in Novosibirsk opera of this opera. In Russian it is Tannhäuser, maybe you know. But it is only a pretext. What would I like to discuss here? Because this club is a theater club, by the way. And so, are there any restrictions for a director, producer, when he or she conceive a new performance of a classical masterpiece, opera, drama, comedy, etc.? And do attempts to introduce drastic changes into the classical version reflect only a serious lack of real talent needed to feed classics. So two opposite opinions, because some people think that it's necessary to change the scenario and some other things, and some people reject this attitude. So I would like to learn the opinions of the members of the theatre club on this question. So I'd like to ask first people who are not in the schedule. So I would start. Andrei, I do not see Andrei Kasilov. Yes, the next. In this case, Alan.
What do I think about changes in classic plays? Yes. As for me, I think that in our modern life we need some changes at least. For example, if we know the play or anything, the classic play, for example, yes? If we know it for many years and we need something fresher, something more up to date, it's very good to do it a little bit up to date than it used to be. For example, if we talk about the club, as you mentioned, is it good to leave the rules as they were several decades ago, or is it good to make it a little bit more up to date? I think that both variants are good, but in the case of our club, I would like to use some modern things, some modern rules to make it more interesting, to make it more interesting for people to visit.
Thank you. Now, please, invite Lera. Please. No opinion. So in this case, Dmitry.
Dear Mr. Table Toastmaster, dear fellow members and guests, so should I answer two questions?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question is about opinion of a director and his view on a certain very famous play. I think that a person can change a play, or at least his opinion on it, but in case if it is talented, it is made with some talent, or at least if the person has something to say. Because being in theater and seeing things, I can say that there are a lot of new techniques which you can apply to theater performance or a movie or something else, because as theater develops or movie making develops, there are a lot of technical things which you can add, as I said, and I think that sometimes they can help to reveal the idea which the director has. For example, in the theater there can be some video cameras used, and also some of the part of the performance can be shown on the screen at the same time, and somehow you can see the reaction of people and the emotions, better understand how people on the stage, how characters reveal themselves, how characters interact between each other. So I think that there can be some adjustments, but only if they had some aim to be. And talking about the lack of talent, I think that if person makes something different, it means that he or she has something to do different. And a person doesn't know that if he is really talented or not. And only in the process, maybe he can understand and the audience can understand. So I would like to say that I always praise the attempts, and that is why the second question is not about the lack of real talent, but for me the attempt is more important.
Thank you. Any talent of directors or producers? So I'm taking it here. So unfortunately, in this case, I would invite maybe some. John, please come here. Present your American point of view.
I can answer either one of
Yes.
these questions.
There, come here.
Yes. I am not sure if we are asking the right question. Can a director, or does a director have any restrictions? I think those are given to the director by the company or by the opera house. 3 years ago, the Bolshoi Theater reopened. Do you remember that? It was closed for many years and it reopened. Tickets to those dramas, to those, not dramas, but operas and ballets were very, very expensive. In the first 3 weeks, there was a new opera. I cannot remember the name. It was Ludmilla.
Tristan and Luton.
It was
Tristan
and Ludmilla.
Zola.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Ruslan. It was Ruslan and Ludmilla. That was it.
That, something
I
like
forgot.
that.
There
It
was
was
a
so
reason.
bad. Look,
There was a reason I forgot this opera, because when we went, it was brand new. It was a new creation. And it is very common for my wife, Sonnet, and I to not always follow a Russian opera. But as we were sitting in this Russian opera, it was very confusing. We did not understand anything. The next day, we went home and we read reviews, and the reviews were awful. They were awful. And that opera only ran 1 week or 2 weeks before it was canceled. So it is not, do you have any limitations? It is what risk does a director take when he rewrites an opera? Because this director was closed down after 2 performances because he did not do a good job with a classic opera. So I think the real question is not what restrictions, because obviously this opera director had no restrictions. But the real question is, what is the risk they will take?
Thank you. Now, Lisa and Sonnet. Tell us something
okay.
and teach us.
Thank you very much. I think I'm supposed to do that. Thank you.
Hello. I'd like to answer, are there any restrictions for a director or producer when he or she conceives a new performance of a classical masterpiece? The first thing that I thought of was the opera that we went to that was not successful, because when you are doing something like this, you have a financial backer. Who do you want to please? Do you want to please the audience who will come see something? Do you want to make money and please your backer? Or do you want to give your wife or husband a starring role in something? So you have to determine who your audience is and what your purpose is. And I was thinking of the opera that was not successful. But then on the other hand, Has anyone heard of West Side Story? West Side Story. That is a remake of a classic. Does anyone know? Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, everybody has loved that story by Shakespeare for years and years and years. And who would have thought it could be improved on? But it was. It was improved on by West Side Story. They made a lot of money. People became very famous. They had a movie, on and on. So the restriction you have to determine is what your purpose of doing something. I know the opera that was in Novosibirsk crossed the line in some people's mind for, does this mean something? It crossed the line in a moral code, I think. So anyway, that's my point. Thank you.
The substitutes, the main hero of that opera was until by Christ. Such a renovation. Well, who would like to add something to our discussion? Please, please.
What is opera, drama, comedy, etc.? It can be a brand, right? You have created something. Drama, Romeo and Juliet. It's a brand. If you create something, name it Romeo and Juliet, and it's very bad, a generation of young people can say, well, Romeo and Juliet is actually a very poor thing. It's not worth reading, it's not worth paying your attention to, it's not worth investigating. So one of the restrictions which should be applied to things remastered is you have to probably notice that it's not the thing, but it's based on the thing and was created without authorization by the author.
Dear Mr. Table Topics Master, dear fellow Toastmasters and guests, I'll start with a story. Once I saw a poem in the internet. The poem, for my own opinion, was quite stupid. And I got a chance to see some interview with the author of this poem below. Someone asked him whether he read any poems at all, so does he remember his poems, and he responded that he never read anything and he even doesn't remember his own poems. So I think that if we look at an example of directors, producers of the past, for example, from the Soviet Union, they all read books, they all had experience of watching some operas, some classical operas, so they were enough educated to suggest their new vision based on this. So I think that first, if you want to give your own some changes into some classical opera, drama, and etc. So you need first to watch the classics. Thank you.
Alex, please. You will be restricted by time.
Well, I think, first of all, the person who directs an opera should have some moral values that are, which which resonate with moral values of the society, because that's, in my opinion, it's very important. And if he has his own opinion about something, exclusive opinion, maybe he should, do some test viewing of this opera to see what the reaction would be on the thing, and then perform it on a bigger audience. I think this is the answer to the problem. Maybe if they had tested it, there would not be such a resonance of this thing, I think. So this is my thought of this. Thank you.
Hey, please. I'm a little bit surprised. This club is well known as a theater club, and nevertheless, you do not respond. It's rather strange. Maybe Ilya, would you add something?
This is Toastmasters. For Toastmasters and guests. I would like to answer the first question. I visited some modern plays which based on classical theater but was renovated by contemporary producers with contemporary style, and sometimes it's good. It's very good. The performance on the stage is very vivid, very alive, I would say. It's much more interesting to watch. As I mentioned, it will be if there will be some classical play. But sometimes producers are too extreme in their expressions. Last time I visited Shakespeare's play, and it was nice. There wasn't any classical decorations and so forth. Only few groups, huge groups on the stage. People ran in the crowds on the stage, and that made like curtains. So crowd is running on the other side, and only two people left, and they play. Then crowd is running again, then only few people left, and they play. That's how the stage changes. But sometimes the stages from the play were improved with some sexual sense that wasn't mentioned by Shakespeare, I believe. And it was a bit awkward to watch, because before that, it was good. After that, some people started to leave the performance. So I think there should be some restrictions, at least some, what is the name? Not moral, but censorship. There should be censorship on the pre-play, pre-screening. Thank you.
Please, again.
I've been on the stage a few times already, but I just heard several things that I would like to comment on. Now, I first of all have to make a disclaimer, because I myself like my classics in a classic way. I mean, I do love things like sci-fi or fantasy movies, but when I go to see a classical play, I want it to be classic. But the interesting thing is why I want that. I sometimes wonder why so many of us want our classics to be classical. It's just the way we have been brought up, because this is actually a defining feature of the, so to say, Soviet taste. Because at the beginning of the Soviet history, we used to be quite innovative. There was all this, Cubism, and we had Malevich and futurists, suprematists, all those guys. But then gradually we had a kind of a reactionary revolution, and our art and our taste in art became very, very conservative, and all the things modern, surprising, unexpected, innovative came to be associated with the West, which is obviously a bad thing. And so this is the way in which we have been brought up. And the thing which actually made me jump up from this seat is Shakespeare. Because Shakespeare was not quite what we imagined him to be. I'll say just two things. Well, first of all, most of us know and admire Shakespeare, at least his sonnets, translated by Samuel Marshall. who is the kid's poet who did fabulous translations. Personally, I love Marshak's translations better than Shay's Forms, who was obsessed with the taste, the smell, the strong passions, the feelings. Marshak, he uplifted him into sort of a classical ideal, in a more of a 19th century style, refined and lofty. This is not Shakespeare. And my second experience was when I went to London to the Globe Theatre, where they pride themselves on staging the most Shakespearean performances ever. And there they had, you know, the kind of thing that Ilya just mentioned. It was a bit dirty. They made dirty jokes. They had gaudy displays. And they said this was actually the way they performed Shakespeare hundreds of years ago. So when we are talking about classics, we should bear in mind that we ourselves have been brought and conditioned to perceive it in a certain way, and that it may actually be different from what we think it is. So it's not like they defile the classics. They probably defile our perception of the classics. So we should, you know, take our indignation down a peg or two.
So, I would say, no, John, let's say history or song, I don't remember, and Romeo and Juliet are different different masterpieces. So I do not mean such a kind of remake. No objection. But could you imagine, for example, a well-known musical, Cats, where cats would be substituted by frogs, for example, or lions? Absolutely impossible. But people, for example, in that very tourism, they did that very procedure. And in some other, Eugene Onegin, for example, was performed in some opera in an absolutely scandalous way. Nobody rejected it. No response was done in the mass media because that performance didn't touch our Russian Orthodox Church, contrary to some. So I definitely support Sergei and some others that some, not changes, but some kind of improvements, adjustment to the modern situation, some stresses for the modern possible. But do not change the main scenario, definitely.